Welcome in, wrestling fans, to an emergency power hour. Eric, we got some developments going on here with the PIAA with our mask wearing guidelines. We have postseason wrestling going on right now as we speak. We got sections in Whippeal in Double A going on right now. Tomorrow is going to be sections for the Triple A. We got District 6 running their tournament right now. We're in the thick of it, right? And the PIAA had a board of directors meeting on the 17th, so 2 days ago. A lot of information came out of that, especially when we talk about the mask wearing. So we learned a few things. One, we learned that the PIAA state dual team tournament is going to happen. They were able to move it from the Giant Center over to Cumberland Valley High School, and they're going to have the first rounds happen, the quarterfinals happen at the site of the higher team on the bracket, the top team on the bracket. That is also curious because they changed the bracket around to make it more geographically friendly. So we actually learned a lot from that board of directors meeting, because normally we get a lot of fluff and not a lot of tangible things we can take away from. And in that case, we actually learned a lot throughout, because of the mask ruling, which we're going to break down here today, Eric. But what were you able to look at any of the things? I know you talked to some folks. What were your initial reactions or thoughts when you saw the guidelines that were in place, which we're going to go over here in detail, but I just wanted to initially get your thoughts, Eric.
Yeah, this is what I kind of sprung on you mid-show on Sunday. So, the form there that schools are going to have to fill out and say, okay, this wrestler is exempt. He or she doesn't need to wear a mask whenever they're competing. And that kind of basically is a protection for the school district, that if something would happen later, they say, hey, the parent and or a doctor or someone said that it was not safe for this wrestler to compete with a mask on. And so if they end up being exposed to COVID or getting it, then there's really not much of a legal recourse there, I think is kind of what the whole situation is about. And it also gives a little more clarity, because there was a lot of confusion before. What happens if your school requires you to wear a mask and that you wrestle someone wearing a mask, and my school says, no, I don't have to wear a mask, and we meet? What happens in that instance? And as it is now, if your school says you can't wrestle someone not wearing a mask, and I refuse to, and I'm on that exempt list, then you have to forfeit the match.
Which, I mean, so there's a few layers to this. One, not all districts and not all conferences are requiring mask wearing. Where you are in the Somerset area, District 6, District 5 area, you're seeing kind of like would you say 80-20, 80 mask wearing, 20 not, or is it lower than that? What would you say it is, Eric?
I'm not sure how many of the schools actually require it. I know I just talked to a coach a few minutes ago, and he said my school didn't require it all year, but we wore them anyway because the schools that we were competing against wouldn't wrestle us without them. But he said postseason, we're not doing it. He said we didn't do it Tuesday for the sectional. We're not doing it for the guys that I have moving on in the district tournament.
So the biggest point to this, Eric, is this is for intra-district competition, which is that's a very important point to note, that this is not for your inner district, right? You're not your District 5 tournament, not your District 6 tournament. This is for when we go to a regional tournament that has more than one district, the super regionals that have multiple districts and multiple regions, and the PIAA individual tournament, as well as the team tournament. So that is very important to note, because there was a lot of confusion of, okay, well, my district's not saying I have to wear a mask. Well, now districts, I'll just give you my personal, being out in the Whippeal, seeing a lot of Whippeal teams, there wasn't a whole lot of mask wearing. Not a lot of schools. I think Mount Lebanon was one of the only schools that actually wanted their wrestlers to wear masks. And Maxed Out, for example, had an individual exemption, so he didn't have to wear one. Most schools out here in the West aren't wearing them. You look at teams out East, you have, District 11, District 2, District 3. A lot of those teams, they're wrestling in masks. They've been wrestling in masks. So it's really interesting, because you're going to have teams that now there are exemptions, right? Now, is it going to be a blanket exemption? I listened to Dr. Bob Lombardi of the PIAA. He gave an interview, And he basically said this isn't a blanket exemption list. This is, we're trusting the administrations, so that's a school, the AD, and which the AD and parents, or AD and principals are saying, well, we trust the parents, right? And you can kind of give us a little bit more on that, Eric, because you were speaking to some principals and ADs about that. But the thought right now is, if you are exempt from wearing a mask and you compete, that person who doesn't want to compete against you because they're required to, it's like wrestling a girl and you're a Catholic school. You're going to have to forfeit that match. But there is no quote blanket team exemption. It's individual exemptions.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the way it is, but I just heard from a coach right before we started the broadcast, and he said that their board approved basically a blanket exemption for the entire team. That the school board said, no, our wrestlers don't have to wear masks. So I think it's still going to be very contentious. I think the idea was to try to eliminate some of that, but I'm sure whenever you get some of those, as you said, the Eastern teams and wrestlers meeting up with those in the West that haven't been wearing them as much, I think it's going to get really contentious, and there's still going to be a lot of people upset over this.
And the other point is, I mean, I tweeted out, it was clear as mud at one point, right? It was very confusing, even as listening through the meeting and watch and kind of hearing other people's reactions on Twitter and seeing what other folks were hearing and interpreting what the board was actually saying. It's, there's a lot of talking in circles. There's a lot of, well, and Bob Lombardi does not like hypotheticals, but he played that game a little bit and said, okay, so if, team A goes against team B doesn't want to wear masks, they're required to, they have to forfeit that match, right? So when we look at the teams, by this time, because the team tournament is not till the end of March, one, things could change by then. Two, that's a while. That's by then we're probably going to have most of these things ironed out, I would say. But the real big test is going to be those regionals that are happening in a week, maybe a week possibly, that you're having intra-district wrestlers compete. So like the Northwest region in AAA, you're going to have District 8, District 6, District 4, District 9, all these wrestlers. And I'm looking at it like this way. Dyson Gold, our boy, who's wrestling in his first ever postseason, District 4 and District 9 combined to form a district tournament. By the letter of the law, they have to wear a mask unless they have an exemption, correct? I mean, that's the way I interpret it.
Yeah. Unless your name is on that list, as I understand it, you have to wear a mask.
Right. And so I'm going to put up that form right now. I'm going to bring that up so you can see it, what that actually looks like. Well, first there's a screening form. Okay. So there's a form that you can use to screen in and show like, okay, hey, you're actually not sick. You can come in and compete. So that's the form right there. In the last 7 days, have you experienced any of these symptoms? All these symptoms that we're so used to hearing, but also it talks about, that COVID certification. I certify that all coaches, athletes, and other persons from my team attending today's contest have been asked each of the preceding questions today and have answered no to each question. So that is basically like the legality portion of it, Eric, where you're saying, okay, legally we asked all these things, we got all these boxes checked, we're good, right? This every coach. So coaches have their hands full, going forward in the postseason, because they're like, all right, I got to fill out this form, I got to fill out that form, and you can see on there's a signature and a date. So I'm assuming they're gonna have to do this for every single competition. If you read that, I'm assuming that you would probably have to do that for each weekend that you're competing. That's interesting, right? That you're gonna have to, now there's that form. And what I heard in listening to it was mostly that form is a guide, that if you want to use one before, or that's different, that you have another one, you can, but that was more of a guide. So what I put up right now is the PIAA postseason COVID-19 universal face covering certification. So this is a lot, right? And you look at this, it says general rule, right? These were the FAQs, the frequent asked questions that the PIAA posed to the Department of Health. Does this apply to all athletes and activities? The answer, yes. Indoors, it doesn't matter. You still, coaches, athletes, cheerleaders, everybody, those who are actively engaged in workouts, competition, and on the sidelines have to wear a mask. Now, the masking requirement is mandatory. So that's where the PIAA is saying, for that reason, the PIAA Interdistrict Championships in tournament in all sports, PIAA requires all persons affiliated with a team, including those actively participating in a contest other than swimming. So swimmers, go ahead, you don't have to wear a mask. I would equate wrestling and swimming to almost like the same thing. I
what if they give them scuba gear?
Scuba gear. I think, you want to challenge yourself, put on some scuba gear and go ahead and swim a freestyle. There you go. Wrestling, on the other hand, so the only exception permitted is for those persons during competition and falling under an exception in Section 3 of the order. PIAA will accept a certification from either the principal or athletic director of a school that the school has made a determination that a student qualifies for an exception for participation during a contest. That is it right there. That's the crux of what we're talking about here. The ADs and the principals are required. So even like what you said with the District 5, a school saying, we're giving a blanket exemption, they still have to fill out that form and write in the names of all these individuals to say, these are, you can't just put my team is, I could see that someone put, I don't believe in this crap, and just turn in the form,
little backwards
just,
E there, written, scraggly.
commas, places, that's, we shouldn't say that. You still have to put in each individual name to say that my exception is for all these following wrestlers, which I guess makes sense because your whole team's not, going on. You're only going to have each week you're going to have a, variety of different wrestlers competing, not necessarily your whole team. What the order also says is no exception will be accepted for any persons while not actually participating in a contest. So they have to be worn on sidelines at all times. And if a school has determined that an exception is merited for a participant, the following certification must be completed. That's where the certification is below that. That is the legal jargon. I hereby certify that each of the following players qualify for an individual medical exemption specific to their individual health condition from wearing a mask during a contest as per Section 3 in the updated order of the Secretary of PA Department of Health. So there it is. You have to then spell it out. In particular, I certify that wearing a face covering would either cause a medical condition or exacerbate an existing one, including respiratory issues that impede breathing, health condition, or disability for the following students. So that is it in a nutshell. And I'll put up the other exemption form here. So then this is the form. There's a variety of different slots you can put in. Any student and team entering the PIAA Interdistrict Championship Tournament consents to. So here's another big one, Eric. This is the consent form, if you will, that says any student and team entering a PIAA Interdistrict Championship. So that means by virtue of you qualifying for the Northwest Regional in AAA, you consent to participate against students who have been granted an exception certified through completion of this form by the student school. So if I get an exception, Jeff Upson gets an exception, and I'm wrestling for, Central Dauphin, and I'm wrestling against Eric Knopsnyder from Berlin, and your school says you absolutely cannot wrestle against somebody who's not wearing a mask, you're forfeiting in that match, right?
Yep.
And that's what it says. In the sport of wrestling, such a forfeiture eliminates a student from further competition in that tournament. So
now, I do have a question about that part. So you don't even get a wrestle back if this happens in the championship round?
Well,
because that's what it says.
Yeah, you're done. You're you're 0-2 barbecue. I think you can't.
Wow,
I mean, at least that's. I'll pull it back up just to.
Because that's what it says. It says it eliminates. It doesn't say if it's your second loss or it says you're out altogether.
Such a forfeiture eliminates a student from further competition in that tournament. See Rule 10-2-5 10-2-5 of the NFHS wrestling rule books. So I guess you're eliminated from that. I guess it's different than like a it's almost like a disqualification, I guess. You can't
So, I mean,
you can't even wrestle back.
do you even go forward if your teams that are requiring masks? I mean, do you go and have your school win 3 district championships and then move on to the regional and not be able to wrestle? I mean,
Yeah, I think that's an
I'm interested.
individual.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
how does that work? Because if you say we're not allowing our guys to wrestle against someone not wearing a mask, then what do you do in that instance? Is it right for you to take those regional spots and go and just bow out?
I mean that's a question of moral ethics. I think like I don't know whether because the chances are, let's just be honest, like if so that's why the Max Stout thing was so interesting and so complex to me, was because he had an exemption, but the rest of his teammates necessarily didn't have one. So, and their school was saying you absolutely have to wear a mask when wrestling somebody. That's why when Mount Lebanon was wrestling other teams, they said you guys have to agree to wear a mask when you're wrestling against us, or else we can't come. So yeah, if maxed out, for example, I mean, the chances are from sections until the state finals, there's a pretty darn good chance you're going to run into somebody who has an exemption to not have to wear a mask. I mean, from what I'm hearing is, basically, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm hearing that most schools and most coaches and ADs and principals are just saying, hey, in wrestling, if you are if you're going to be competing in the postseason, we're going to put your name on the list here. You're going to be exempt from wearing a mask. I don't know if that's, again, but
seems like common sense to me.
What, that you would do that?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
but
we've said all year that wearing a mask impedes your ability to breathe. I mean, it's hard enough, if you got if you're a 215 pounder and you got a guy that has you on your back, whether you have a mask on or not, it's going to be hard to breathe. You put a mask on there and that's going to be really difficult.
You know what I loved during the question and answers that Bob Lombardi did with the media? He referenced the term chin diapers. I absolutely love that. I lost my mind. I was like, yes, go Bob, because I love the term chin diapers, because that's really what it looks like when you're wearing the medical mask down. It just looks like, and I got to get used to wearing, or not wearing diapers, but changing diapers. So it's
you do. It's coming soon. By our next podcast, you could be changing diapers.
I mean, by this podcast, I could. You may hear somebody yelling down, Jeff, we got to go. We have got to go.
You'll be like, we got to wrap this up. We got 10 more minutes. Just hold off.
So before we came down, she was like, ooh, and I was like, what is that, a contraction? What's happening? And I was like, can you at least, like, we got the power hour at 6. Like, can we just like hold it off until at least afterwards? But then we have Penn State, Ohio State at 7. So if you could just really delay it to after that, that'd be good too. Eric, the whole masking thing. So yeah, I would think that most schools and most administrators are going to say, hey, we're going to leave it up to, we're not requiring a doctor to come in and sign off on this. Like you said, did you already say this about the parent, the athletic director?
I think we talked about it off the air.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and say what you heard.
I talked to a principal and he said, hey, look, if Johnny misses school on Monday, I take a note from his parents on Tuesday saying Johnny was sick, he couldn't come to school on Monday. I don't require them to give me a doctor's notice about it. He said, I'm going to treat this the same way. If Johnny's mom says, hey, Johnny can't wrestle with a mask on, he can't breathe, then I'm going to take that as her word for it. And I trust that parent. And they're saying that he's okay to wrestle without the mask on.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it and this is really legalities. This is really to CYA type thing. Especially on the PIAAs, because prior to the postseason, right? The PIAAs, what was their stance? Their stance was, it's an individual choice. It is your school district. It is your family. It is, we are not going to take a stance on this in a hard and fast rule, because we believe this is a local issue, right? But now their hands are forced, because now you have different people following different rules and different, masking requirements. So now you have the situation where the PIAA is having people from District 1 wrestling people from District 7. Well, now we have to have a blanket. We have to have some type of, you're either in or you're out. And I would agree with you that I would think most schools and most administrators are just going to say, hey, if you're competing in wrestling and you're going into the postseason, your name is going to be on that list, right? Because wrestling in a mask is not conducive. It's not safe. It's not. But here's the thing: people have been wrestling like 20 matches with masks on. Now, I'm not saying they were up above their nose the entire time, but wrestlers, especially out east, and I am out in the west, so I see and hear a lot more out west. But I also know that out east, a lot of teams, most teams, are wearing masks when they're wrestling. So you have people out here in the Whitfield saying, I'm not wearing a mask. I haven't trained in a mask. I haven't worn a mask. There's teams that practice with masks on daily. So it just makes sense that you come in, you have this form, hey, these 5 kids are going into the district tournament. I'm putting their 5 names out. Now, maybe you have a parent that says, nope, I don't want them on there. I would have to, let's say chances are there's probably going to be at least 1 or 2, I don't know, maybe wrestlers that aren't on the exemption list. But could you imagine not being on that exemption list? And, now you're wrestling somebody and you have to wear a mask, and I don't, and now you're wrestling somebody who's not wearing a mask. That's not right. So there's a lot of complexities here, Eric.
Yeah, it's and that this is, as I said, I think this is going to continue to be very contentious if there are those, and I'm sure there are going to be some people who their school or their parents or whatever require them to wear a mask, and it's going to get really, really ugly, I think.
Well, and the other important thing to note is that this is, you have to know what's going on like right now, right? Because it's not long until these events and these things are happening. So you got to get your stance and pretty much know what it is pretty soon, right? So I'm looking at it like, okay, what is everyone's schools? What is our policies? And you have coaches, you have so many different, almost like red tape. You have all this red tape to jump through. You got your principal, your superintendent, your athletic director, all these different people are saying, okay, what's our rule here? This is what the PIAA is saying. This is what they're recommending. What do we need to do in order to comply and, go forward with this? Because let's just be honest, wearing a mask in wrestling is not safe. It is not feasible. It's just not right. So why would you not want to use this exemption, even if you don't have a doctor's excuse? I mean, as far as I read on there, it says if it impedes your breathing. Well, guess what? It impedes my breathing, and I'm having trouble breathing in the third period, let alone as it is, let alone having a mask on, Eric.
It impedes my breathing when I walk into Walmart with it on. I mean, it's it's hard. It's different, and to do that in an athletic competition as grueling as a wrestling match, even without the contact involved between the wrestlers. I mean, I can't imagine doing it in a soccer game. How do you run that far and breathe that hard with a mask on? I mean, it's not natural.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not. And I want to put up on the screen some of the screenshots I took from some of the tweets that I saw. So this is Ali. How do you say her name, Eric?
Barubi.
She's out in Harrisburg, ABC 27. Clarification on mask policy for PIAA state playoffs. Everyone required to wear a mask at all times, including in game. Individuals can be exempt if certified by school and communicated to other team. Improper mask wearing should be corrected. And actually, this is a video here. I can't play it, but this is Bob Lombardi doing some question and answers with the media. And this is where he used references the term chim diaper. So that was pretty awesome. But it was really as clear as mud, right? When we're talking about, at least especially listening to it, I was very uncertain. And this is what Ali tweeted out right before that was mask mandate will be enforced at PIAA state games. Athletes will be required to wear masks at all times unless the school is certified that an individual has an exemption. Then the athlete can take off masks during competition and competition only. PIAA will trust schools to fill out forms honestly. So there it is, right? We are entrusting on you to fill these out honestly. So that way, if there's a COVID outbreak at the PIAA individual state tournament, you're not suing the PIAA and saying this was reckless because, hey, look at all these things we put in place.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And that's what I know that Lombardi said that, hey, look, we trust the principals and the athletic directors to get us a roster and verify that this student is eligible, that her grades are good enough, that she's not over the age limit. We don't go and check all of these things to make sure they're eligible. We're not going to go and check their doctor's note to see that they don't have to wear a mask.
And nor should they, right? I mean, like
No,
you
no, I
said, I
agree.
mean, that's so. I mean, I think it's fair. But I also think, what if you have that school or program who's saying, that's not gonna be okay with just saying, hey, I mean, you have to assume that that's going to happen, that you're going to have a
Hmm.
school, and in my talkings with some folks, I mean, especially out east, you have District 11 where teams like Nazareth and Northampton, those teams are shut down constantly. They only got 2 or 3 dual meets at the most. And even South East, District 1 schools, District 12 schools, you may not have administrators that are saying, hey, yeah, we're okay with this. Even if you get a doctor's note or whatever, I'm assuming there has to be at least 1 or 2 that are just saying, hey, you're not exempt. So that means, because it's almost like, are you on the VIP list? That's almost like what it feels like. You have this clipboard, you got a bouncer standing out front, and he's like, all right, maxed out. Yep. All right, you're good. No mask for you. Next person, oh, nope, you got to wear a mask. And here's the other thing. I mean, we've been around some wrestling this year, and it's like you got to have it on at all times when you're not wrestling. So that's another thing. Like, there's gonna be a lot of times where wrestlers, like, oh, I'm exempt, I'm not gonna wear the mask at all. But it's like, unless you're actually engaged in competition, i.e., wrestling against somebody else, that mask better be on. Like, I would. I, the poor Giant Center security
That's
guards.
what I was just thinking of.
Can
Those
you
guys
imagine?
that used to
They're
run around.
ruthless. They
Yeah, I
are.
mean, like they seem to have eased up on it, but I know back in the day when I wore baseball caps and had hair, you weren't allowed to have a baseball cap on the floor of the Giant Center,
Well,
and they'd be like chasing you down and be like, "Hey, you got to take that off."
that's
They're gonna
that's
do this with every mask too. Like,
that's a
hey,
Bob
that kid
Lombardi
over there.
thing. He
Yeah,
he he does not like. I should take my hat off in honor
yeah,
of
and
Bob.
in respect, yeah.
Actually, my hair is a little bit too messed up. He he doesn't like the whole mask, or the hats down on the floor. But yeah, I mean, can you imagine those PIAA, those Giant Center security? And I worked at Hershey Park for 7 years of my life. Never a security guard though. But man, some of them take their jobs like way too seriously. Way too seriously.
I
Like,
want
I
to
had
see the step counter on those guys though. If they're running across the floor to tell a kid to put his mask up every 10 seconds.
Well, I mean, so at least in the communications from the PIAA are, that's got to be on the coaches, that's got to be on the game manager, right? So whoever's in charge of that, that site director, that tournament director, somebody, they're going to be responsible for making sure that everyone's in compliance with the mask guidelines. I mean, look, it's like it's like everything we've seen since COVID. I mean, it's never gonna. It's always looks good on paper. A lot of these things look good in paper, but in practicality and when in reality, they don't necessarily work, and it's not feasible and it's not practical to do. But at least they are coming out with something to say, hey, this is what you should expect. That way, schools and administrators and coaches can say, hey, you're exempt. We're putting you on this list. That way, you don't have to worry about it, because again, this is happening in less than a week. You're going to be having intra-district wrestling going on across Pennsylvania, Erica, and you're going to be seeing that very soon up in your region.
Yeah, as I understand it, District 5 actually passed this, even though it only applies from the PIAA standpoint to the inter-district. District 5 has passed it and said that this is in effect for their tournament tomorrow. So
Okay.
as I understand it, yeah, they're gonna hold teams to this standard starting tomorrow.
So, and how many teams are there in District 5?
10.
So, of those 10 schools, you're saying this is going to be applicable, right? They're going to have these forms. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my understanding of it. And I just got this information right before we went on the show, but that's my understanding, is that the District 5 passed it and that it's happened. But I've heard from 2 of the schools already that said, yeah, our guys they're all going to be on the list.
They're all, so okay. So that's the question I had, is I wonder if of those schools, how many of those are going to have. Because,
My guess would be at least 6 of them.
Yeah.
That everybody on their team is going to be on there.
And it's different for wrestling because we're in the individual postseason as opposed to basketball, where you have how many players.
What do they do there? Do you know? Is it like a technical at some point if a player keeps letting their mask down, or what happens?
I mean, from what I've seen, now I'm no basketball expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm certainly not a wrestling expert either. But the what I've seen is it's, and this is one area of contention as well, because Bob Lombardi was having a kind of, he gets grilled. I feel for the PIAA. I mean, I'm not always on in favor of some of the things the PIAA does and says, and that's neither here or there. But
Charges.
I do feel for them in this situation because they're saying, well, who's going to enforce this in the game? Like, is it the refs? Is it the refs' responsibility? Is the mask a part of the equipment? People are saying like, not really. Like, can the ref really enforce that? What Bob said in talking with Allie was simply that the ref should say it to the coach. Say to the coach, hey, coach, 35 needs to put his mask up, right? So now the coach can say the onus is on them to say, hey, make sure your players have their mask up, and then if that basketball match or team, what do they call them? Games. They're games. I'm sorry, I was just joking. There's games happen, and the losing team, and they're saying, well, hey, this team, they didn't have their mask on the whole time, and they can bring it. They can like petition for it, and he kind of went into it a little bit. It really didn't apply to wrestling, so I didn't really care that much. But I guess it could in teams, right? Because you are going to have your team championships coming up a month later, which we're going to talk about in a second. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Well, the one coach that I talked to said that he's spoken to attorneys about it, and there's still some confusion as to whether you wrestle and you lose to a guy who didn't have a mask on, and then 3 days later, before the next tournament, before the super regional, you say, well, wait a minute, that guy doesn't have a note. We talked to his school, and he doesn't have a doctor's note saying that he doesn't have he doesn't have any kind of medical condition. So we want to be in the super regional, and he shouldn't be because he wrestled illegally. So
yeah,
I mean you're gonna get all this craziness. I mean, this is going to be postseason craziness times 100.
Yeah, unfortunately I think you are correct in that thought. But I just don't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pulling up the face coverings here. It says, I'm looking for it. Where it says prior to, in advance. Exasperated. I think it might have been on the other one where it says actually you have to have it. You have to let that team know in advance, right? You need to let them know beforehand. Hey, we are not going to be wearing masks. So, yeah.
So yeah, you bring up a good point. I'm going back a little ways when you said about the clipboard, but is somebody going to be standing on the mat and saying, well, wait, that guy's not on the list, he's got to wear a mask? So is this going to be that situation where wrestler A is supposed to be wearing a mask, he's not on the list, but he shows up, he wrestles without it, and then they say, well, wait a minute, he wasn't on the list, he has to wear a mask?
Listen, I've seen crazier things happen. I can think of a state dual team tournament where someone pointed out laces not being taped and team points, and I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
I mean, how competitive it gets, and how people are willing to look at any rule and say, well, hey, we're just playing by the rules. This is what the rule is. We're just playing by the rules. We're not doing anything illegal. But he's not playing by the rules, so he needs to be punished.
It sounds like are you a coach, Eric? Do you coach on the side?
I've heard a few. I've heard a few of these. Well, hey, I don't care, but I'm a stickler for the rules. It says that in track you can't wear a necklace whenever you do the long jump, and he had a necklace on, so technically that doesn't count.
Right. I mean, hey, rules are rules, man. I don't make them. I certainly hope not. I really hope that's not the case. I really don't. One, you don't have the manpower. You don't have the personnel to be doing that. One, we're limiting the number of people inside of an arena, inside of a venue, period. So are you going to say we need 4 extra people to stand here and go through a list? All right, because this person, yeah, all right, they're good. They don't need to wear a mask. I think that needs to be sorted out prior to. I would think that if I qualified for the state tournament, I know a week in advance. I'm sending my exemption forms to the powers that be and saying, this wrestler, Gavin Garcia is not going to be wearing a mask, right? Wesley Barnes is also not going to be wearing a mask. Cole Bisco also not going to be wearing a mask. It's all on there. So that way when you get there, like, hey, I don't know. Again, that's where I feel for, actually putting this into motion, because again, we're talking about all hypotheticals and theoretical kind of situations, but in practice, it's a mess. In practice, who's going to be, who's the admin who's coordinating all these different things? I mean, you better have an Excel spreadsheet, like, with all these different things if you're really going to enforce that, because if not, it's not going to work out.
I'm just imagining the coach's scouting reports now. It's like, okay, at 113, this guy's got a good sweep single to the left side. He doesn't defend the well on the arm bar, and he doesn't have to wear a mask. So we got to know this going in. We got to have all this stuff, the scouting report on exactly what this guy's going to look like when he shows up.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, instead of looking at like shoes and like, man, that kid's got nice shoes. He's got a knee pad sleeve, and you're like, look, he's wearing a mask. What kind of mask is he wearing?
Are we going to see any true power masks in the postseason?
I saw some in the regular season, so I know Greg Warnock's not going to have one because he never got one.
He's a little salty about that.
Yeah, he's a little salty. Well, before we segue into the the team tournament, we're going to hear from Nick Fuller of the Tactical Mind. We'll be right back in 30 seconds.
This is the Tactical Mind, and I work with athletes in the field of sports psychology as a cognitive performance coach. Within 5 minutes of talking to a parent, they make the connection right away that this would be great for my kid to have when they're in college, when they're just going through the ups and downs of high school. Who wouldn't benefit from having more self-awareness? Who wouldn't benefit from having the ability to self-regulate our emotions and our counterproductive thoughts? Who wouldn't benefit from having more optimism, not just on the field, but in life?
And again, as always, you can use promo code POWER to receive 50% off your initial consultation with Nick Fuller. And if you haven't had a chance, go check out our interview that Nick and I did with Jordan Oliver, the Pride of Easton, man. That was we sat down with him for an hour and just talked about the mental aspect of wrestling. And he told some stories about John Smith. And I don't know if you saw the Smiths documentary, if you will, or not, Eric, but John Smith and what he was saying, and Jordan really highlighted some of the things that he was taught by John Smith, and it's a really good episode to listen to, Jordan Oliver, and you can find that on Rockfin if you just look for our interview with Jordan Oliver with the Tactical Mind. So, Eric, other than the masking that we learned about in the postseason, we also learned about the team postseason, because prior to this, we had no idea what the team postseason was going to look like, because we had District 7 and District 3 wrestled, and District 10 technically, because Reynolds did wrestle in AAA. There was no contest. They wrestled their quote district duels, and actually so did District 8 technically. Other than that, though, no one knew if you were going to actually qualify for a state dual team tournament, because they postponed it till after the individual portion, and we didn't have a date or location set. That's all been changed. We now know what's happening and where it's happening at. So I just put up on screen the bracket for AAA, and they moved some things around just because they were trying to make it more geographically easier for people to see or people to wrestle. So, for example, on the bottom half, you have Waynesburg. They're going to wrestle the winner of Erie Cathedral Prep and Carrick. So Carrick won the City League. Erie Prep, by default, won AAA in District 10. So obviously it's going to be Cathedral Prep unless they all come down with COVID and they don't show up. So Erie Prep versus Waynesburg. Then you have the District 4 and District 9 winner versus the District 6 winner. But again, if you looked at our postseason guide, we don't really know necessarily how they're going to determine. Now, you said District 6 is probably going to be doing one of those things where they determine the dual team or the top 4 teams or whatever it is based off of the team scores at the individual tournament. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, I know in Double A that's the way it's going. I assume that it'd be a district-wide thing. They wouldn't do it differently for Double A than for Triple A.
Yeah, so I think, based on the brackets, they're not filled out, right? So that's the thing. They're not filled out. You may have some districts that just aren't sending a representative. I don't know that for sure. I'm not saying that that's the case. And it's also kind of funny because, my alma mater, Central Dauphin, they win the District 3 tournament. They beat Gettysburg. They're top 5 in the state. And first round, they draw Becca, Bethlehem Catholic, in the first round on the top half. Because I really think the winner of that match is going to be in the state finals, the state finals against Waynesburg. So I think whether it's Central Dauphin or Becca, I think whoever it is going to make it to the state finals. District 1, Council Rock South, Springford. Council Rock South has wrestled probably the most out of any District 1 schools. And then you also have 2-1 and 12-1. So maybe Delaware Valley in there, Father Judge out of 12-1. Not really sure. Again, that's Philly League. I'm not sure how they're going to be doing it. But that's the AAA bracket. Now, you look at the top there. It says March 22nd at TBD, and that's at top school in the match. So Central Dauphin will host Becca. Erie Prep will host Carrick, and so on and so forth. So the top team in that bracket is the host school. Now, they'll wrestle that round and also that second round in that TBD. So March 22nd and the 24th. Then once you get down to 4 teams in both AA and AAA, you're going to be wrestling at Cumberland Valley High School on the 27th, all day the 27th. So that is where it's going to be. If you make it to the state semifinals, that is the AAA bracket. I'll pull up the AA bracket here in just a second, Eric. But I was happy to hear that and the biggest thing that they were unable to work out was the Giant Center, right? So the Giant Center had basketball going on during those weekends, so they couldn't have it at the Giant Center. Their only other option was to go with the Giant Center during the week, and teams it wasn't working out. So that's why they moved it to Cumberland Valley. This is the AA bracket here. So it's actually, you got a couple teams in here. You've got Boiling Springs. They won the District 3 tournament. They beat Newport. They await the winner of 2-1 or 1-1 or 12-1. They'll get that winner. They'll host them as well. So again, geographically, you're not going across the state. And then Notre Dame Green Pond is the only team in District 11 in AA that's competing in the dual team season. Look at who they're going to draw in that first round. 4-1, which in all likelihood is going to be Southern Columbia. So you're going to have a Southern Columbia Notre Dame match at Southern Columbia. My gosh, I don't think my wife can hold it.
Yeah,
March
I was gonna wonder if you could be there for that, Jeff.
March 24th.
She won't mind.
If my son's born next week,
yeah, he'll be like
due date's the
3 weeks
25th.
old.
He could.
It's almost a month.
He should have a job by then, right? He should be fine. He should be out of the house.
That would be the perfect opportunity for him to attend his first wrestling match.
Right. I mean, if I want to pass down the knowledge of PA Power and the heir to the throne, I got to start him early. So if
your first match was Southern Columbia Notre Dame Green Pond in the state dual meet tournament.
3 weeks old. So if you see me swaddling a 3-week-old baby in Southern Columbia High School, don't say you didn't hear it here first.
Or if you see Jeff pounding frantically on his door when he gets back because he's been locked out by his wife, that's probably why.
Locked out, man. The locks are gonna be changed. My stuff will be on the curb, and yeah, that'll be the death of me. So, however, Southern Columbia versus Notre Dame Green Pond, round 1 of the state dual team tournament. That is incredible. That's a great match. If in fact happens. So on the bottom half, you have Burrell, who won the South or the District 7 championship. They beat Burgettstown, and Reynolds is down there as well. So Burrell awaits the winner of 9-1 and 5-1. So
this is basically the Brookville Ultimate Duels.
On
right?
the bottom half, yes, it's the Brookville Ultimate Duels.
Because you're going to have Brookville versus Chestnut Ridge, right?
Right, who they already wrestled.
Right, and then the winner gets Burrell.
Who they already wrestled.
And the winner moves on to wrestle probably Reynolds, who normally is at the Brookville Ultimate Duels.
Right, yeah. So this is like a 2019 Brookville Ultimate Duels tournament right here, right? And then throw in 6-1, right? So Forest Hills, Bald Eagle area, Westmont, whoever comes out of there. Do you think Glendale has a shot?
They were a little disappointing, I think, in the
Yeah.
sectional. So
Okay.
I'm
Well,
not sure.
so
That's the other thing that's going to be really weird with these teams that are basing it on the tournament, because some of these teams that might have done well in a normal year in a district individual tournament kind of got screwed up by this sectional, because you have teams that have a lot of decent guys but no really great guys, and they could have had a bunch of regional qualifiers, but now they're finishing third in their section and not getting to move on to the district tournament.
Well, that's one thing. And before I close this down, I just want to make sure fans can see it. This is PAWrestling.com. So go to PA-wrestling.com and you can view the brackets on there. But, like you said, Eric, this could be I think this is a lot more entertaining than the AAA, because AAA, I mean, Waynesburg's just so good. However, so you touched on the fact that you're going to have these teams that potentially, don't have a good section tournament or a district tournament. But here's the other thing. Waynesburg, for example, Noah Tustin they're the starting 215-pounder for Waynesburg. He was eliminated in the subsection tournament. Okay, he's done. His individual postseason is done. He's a very integral part to the Waynesburg team. And I mean, of course, they could probably win without him, but because they're that good. But Noah Tustin is a big part of that. He is now going to have to say, well, I have a month. I have over a month until the team postseason, when Waynesburg will be wrestling Erie Cathedral Prep. I guess you just say, hey, come back to practice. You're not going to be competing, but I guess that's not as crazy as it sounds, but think about those fringe wrestlers, if you're not on a Waynesburg team.
The good news is for Waynesburg is everybody else is still going to be wrestling through the state tournament. So he's almost going to feel like he's missing something probably if he's not there with his teammates through all that, because all of those guys are going to be going on and placing high at the state tournament. So it's going to be almost like a team competition is still going on. But you're right. It's going to be, hey, Noah, we need you here, but you're just not going to get to have those fruits of getting your hand or raising your own hand on a Saturday afternoon.
But so that it's true, but what about those wrestlers that, aren't Noah Tussin and they're on a team that is decent,
right.
But they play a spring sport, right? They're in cross country. They're in something in the spring where you're saying, hey, like, I know, that season's starting up and you may even have preseason practice going on, but we really want you in wrestling shape because we want you to compete in the dual team state tournament with us. You look at some of these teams that are here. Burrell has some guys that, probably are two-sport athletes. Erie Prep probably have guys that are two-sport athletes. Maybe guys that just aren't going to make it very far in the individual postseason. And you're saying, hey, one, we want you to hold weight because you're going to have to weigh in 3 times, the 22nd, 24th, and 27th, right, if you make it there. You're going to have to weigh in 3 times. So, 1, we want you to hold your weight. 2, we want you to be in wrestling shape. And 3, we want you to actually be practicing.
My guess is that out of how many teams are on there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
every
9,
district,
10.
Eric, there's 12 districts.
Okay, so 12 districts. How many of that do 7 of those? I bet we don't get more than 7 teams in a tournament.
You're saying you believe that of the 12 districts, you think there's gonna be some districts that just don't send a team? Is that is that what you're saying?
Would you be shocked if District 1 or District 12 says, you know what, we're just gonna bag it. We got our district title. We'll secede, and let District 2 champ move on.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be surprised. Look, we saw teams that, good teams that opted out of the team postseason. You saw Hempfield, Franklin Regional out here, and other teams. Look at District 11. Nazareth, Saucon Valley, 2 teams that would have been in contention for a district title and had the chance to go to the team state tournament, elected not to compete. Whether that was, admins or whoever that said, hey, this just isn't going to be working for us. I guarantee you not all of those slots get filled, potentially. And of those teams that are there, how many of them are going to be actual, true, they're full strength, 13 wrestlers, 13 starters on that team. I really don't see that happening. And here's the other issue you have. Some of these districts who have not decided how they're going to be running their state dual team tournament or I'm sorry, district dual team tournament. So like District 4, for example, I know in talking with the Line Mountain folks, they're going to have a lot of kids that once they lose, they're not compete. They're not
Right.
coming back. So if Line Mountain's wrestling in a District 4 team tournament that's not scheduled, do people just say, all right, Southern Columbia, you're the best team, you're going to be going, and even them, you're going to have even Southern Columbia. You're going to have kids that aren't, they're kind of an exception because they have a lot of studs, but you're going to have some guys that they're going to lose this weekend. They're not going to make it back. How are we going to see true teams kind of going through? It's a shell of, what we're used to, but I know people are saying at least it's something, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I was shocked at the number of guys that were in my Southwest AA rankings that didn't wrestle in postseason. And at least a half a dozen, I'm sure more than that, of guys that were in my, top 12 in a weight class that just didn't wrestle in the postseason. And I don't know if that was an injury that, came out late in the season. I don't know if that was a COVID issue. I don't know what it was, but there, more than I've ever seen before, there were guys that I had to pull out of the rankings because they just didn't wrestle in the sectional.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Eric. And doing all the AAA rankings other than the Southeast region, I can't tell you how many wrestlers I pulled out of the rankings from last week to this week, because and for whatever reason, whether it's injury, whether that's just, hey, we're not competing anymore, it's not worth it. I don't know what the reasons are, but there was quite a few wrestlers that actually did compete in the regular season that are not in the postseason bracket. So again, you have to imagine that most of these dual teams are not going to have full strength lineups. Waynesburg's an exception. They're an exception to the rule. Notre Dame may even be an exception because they've got some heavy hitters there. I think most of them will make it to at least this. Well, I can't say. I mean, I don't know if they'll all make it to all those big guys will make it to the Super Region, but it's certainly not going to. I mean, I said this during the Whippeal. You might as well just ship the team title to Waynesburg. I think you should do the same in AAA in the state tournament. Might as well just ship it to Waynesburg. I know that's not the way they want to earn it, but it seems like probably the most sensible thing to do at this point. There's no easy solution. I get it, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, and those Waynesburg kids deserve a chance to wrestle for it. And I'm fine, we're going to have probably a pretty solid top 4 in each AA and AAA. I just don't see those opening round matches happening, or, certainly, I mean, I don't know the first thing about Carrick's coach or their team, but I mean, do you want to get on a bus and ride the whole way to Erie to wrestle that match against Cathedral Prep?
To get shut out? Absolutely not. I don't. I mean, but normally,
that's not the spirit of competition. I get it. And in a normal year, I would say, yeah, absolutely, they should go there and do that, because they won that District 8 title. They should be proud of that and go and compete. But if they don't have, I don't know how many guys are they going to have left after the state tournament that have been practicing, is it worth them trying to stay in shape and keep their team around for 4 weeks to go and wrestle that one match? Doesn't seem like it to me.
Well, and we've already seen it. It's like who lasts. It's like who actually is going to stay in, because you saw it even with the district tournament. All these teams that are just saying, "Hey, we're not doing it." Of these teams, like even if a name's in the bracket, I could still see them just saying, "You know what? We're not." Like you said, we're not going.
Right.
We're not going to Erie Prep. We're not getting on a bus, going up there, getting shut out. We have 3 guys left. 3 guys that are actually practicing. Like, why are we even doing this? Maybe it's the same.
It's really pointless at that point in the season.
You would think so. And is it safe? And is it? I don't think you'll. So
As our friend Mark Billett would say, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Absolutely. And I had a nice conversation with Mark today, and he said he was happy that I was using the term or the phrase "is the juice worth the squeeze," and I use it a lot, and I think I used it in the last podcast a lot. I can't find a way to tie in the Mike with Pete's pants on yet, but the Billitisms.
I will never understand that one.
No one does.
You're as happy as Mike, and for the longest time I thought he said peach pants. I didn't realize he was saying Pete's pants.
Yeah.
Mike is wearing Pete's pants. I thought he was wearing peach pants.
Yeah. Well,
Neither
that's
of
Mark
them
for
make
you.
any sense.
Neither. Yeah. Well, no, the juice worth the squeeze makes sense.
Yeah, that one does.
I
That
get
one
that.
does. I like that one. I have no idea what the pants mean.
All right. Yeah, the pants one, forget about it. But shout out Mark Pillett. Yeah, I think this bracket, the team brackets, the dual team brackets are certainly going to change. Or not, you're just not going to have teams enter. I think that's definitely going to happen. You're going to have districts that aren't going to be hosting or holding a district tournament, so they don't even know who they're going to be sending. So wear your mask and stay around to wrestle in team postings is the message I got for you tonight, Eric.
Carry your clipboard. Check off the names.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to hold you up because we got Penn State versus Ohio State going on in literally right now. So I want to jump off and get that going. Hopefully my wife is not in labor quite yet because I'd really like to see that match. Eric, anything else you want to add before? Will you be anywhere this weekend?
I will be. I'll be at District 5, and I'll actually be calling it for the NFHS network on there. So
that network that you cursed. Wait, hold on.
Don't tell them. Don't tell them that I cursed it.
Time out, Eric. The network that you literally said was the most garbage network ever in the history.
They
of
owe
networks.
me because I paid for like 3 months of that crap accidentally. So
and now you're working for them. Oh my gosh!
I was asked by District 5 to do it, so it's District 5 that I'm working for. I'm not working for NFHS.
Okay. You might as well go work for Flow.
Wow.
Well, we're gonna have the Hempfield section in AAA streamed to Rockfin via the Westmoreland Sports Network. So shout out to Dan Flickinger and Chris Smith. They do a great job. Jeff Shaw, George Carr, they all do a great job. Robbie Waller and Hannah Mears will be there as well. So we're looking forward to tomorrow at Hempfield. So a lot of fun going up. But right now we got Penn State, Ohio State. So Eric, I will talk to you very soon. Again, let's keep our ear to the grindstone here. Let's figure out what exactly is going on in the state of Pennsylvania. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you understand a little bit better than you did last week, because last week was a lot of numbers.
Yeah, I'm following this a little better.
All right. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. We will talk to you very soon again on the PA Power Hour. Talk to you soon.